morning, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for coming out. So it's my pleasure to introduce one of my coworkers, our Collections and Exhibits Manager, Noah Burris, and he is sharing some items from the collection he selected. I don't even know what he's sharing, so I'm going to be as curious as you guys are, because we were already guessing about one of the objects on the end, and we'll see if I was right. And if I'm not, I didn't say that. No. Anyway, take it away, Noah.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. So like Travis said, I'm going to cover some of the collections objects. I'm the Collections and Exhibits Manager here at the museum. So just to start, I'm going to give you a little overview of the number of items in the collection, which isn't a complete number, but we have museum software that we put everything into. And so right now we have 6,900 objects into the software, which is, you know, like your 3D object, your irons, your roller skates, your clothing, stuff like that. We have 12,041 photos, which includes print photos, digital photos, negatives, and then our archives is your like paper documents, your letters, contracts, stuff like that. And there's 5,047 of those. And like I said, that isn't the complete number of items in our collection because we know there are items from before the museum got the software that are not input yet. So the first item we're going to look at is this wooden plaque that advertises Ben Brose, the musical humorist. So Benjamin Brose was born in Quincy, Illinois in 1864. He then ended up moving to Pipestone. We aren't sure on the exact date, but there are references to him in the newspaper in the 1890s, so we know he was here by then. He married Celeste Neffler on January 4th, 1892. And they would go on to open the Brose Millinery and Music Store here in Pipestone. So he kind of covered the music aspect of it, and Celeste was on the millinery side of the business. So you can see on the plaque there, it's got an image of him and a harp and says musical humorist. So there is Ben and Celeste in the top photo there with some instruments, and the bottom is their store there, and it was on the corner of Main Street and 2nd Avenue Northeast. And then we've got this little letter here that he would send out to opera houses trying to get business. He would offer to come and give a show for them. And so he was involved in several other business ventures over the year. He was into taxidermy. He opened a museum-like building here in town. He got in the furniture business. He was involved in a feed mill here in town. But then he began traveling as a musical entertainer on the vaudeville circuit in the early 1900s. And we did find that he was doing music earlier in his life before he moved to Pipestone, so he kind of got involved in the other businesses here and then got back to entertaining people. So by 1902, he billed himself as a musical comedian. And on this letter here, it looks like he had some other people involved in his show because he kind of pluralized everything. But he said that these musical comedians, he has impersonators, cartoonists, harpists, singers, dancers, and musical comedians of the highest rank. So it sounds like he was able to put on a pretty good show. And if you'd like to learn anything more about Ben and Celeste, we actually do have a good article that Susan wrote up on our website that kind of lays out more about their business in town and their family life here in Pipestone. Then we have the Panama Pacific International Exposition coin purse. So this was given out at the World's Fair, or the Panama Pacific International Exposition, which was held from February 20th to December 4th, 1915 in San Francisco. So World's Fairs actually date back to around 1791. They held one in Prague as kind of an industrial exposition, but the first modern one is viewed as being held in London in 1851, and they would often focus on advancements and technology and just the future. You know, you'd get countries that would have different pavilions, booths, and all sorts of different buildings people could go and visit. So this specific fair was celebrating the completion of the Panama Canal, and it was also viewed by a lot of people as the opportunity for San Francisco to show off how they had recovered from the earthquake of 1906. That was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake that destroyed 80% of the city. So they were able to rebuild pretty much the entire city in preparation for the fair in 1915. So the fair covered over 600 acres, and over 18 million visitors showed up to the fair over that little less than a year span. So a couple of the highlights of the fair that was available for people to view. There was a steam locomotive. They had a telephone line to New York City. So across the country telephone line so people were able to hear the Pacific Ocean. That was how they sold it to people. That's why they had one put up. And then also the Liberty Bell came to visit. They took the Liberty Bell from Philadelphia and made a cross-country trek to San Francisco to have it on display at the fair.
The one that's in Philadelphia?
Yes.
I've seen that up there.
So not only does it advertise the fair on the outside, but if you open it up, it says compliments of Jerry Hines, Pipestone, Minnesota. So he used it as a premium for his business to give out to people. And we don't know a lot about Jerry Hines' time in Pipestone, but we do know that he operated the Jerry Hines Pool and Billiards at 119 West Main Street in Pipestone in the 1910s. So he got in on the World's Fair action, took that, made it into a premium for his business to advertise for himself.
He also had a roller rink north of town.
Okay.
On 75.
We're going to talk about some roller rink stuff here in a little bit. Here is the Kalamazoo lighter. So it is often mistakenly described as a World War I trench lighter, but it is in fact not. World War I predates when this version of the lighter would have came out. So it was patented in the 1920s by Austrian Hans Silbernoff, and then it was manufactured by the Bauer's Company out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, beginning in the 1930s, excuse me. And it was produced for around 20 years. There were a couple different models of it, two main ones that were different, and then they also put out a bunch of different, smaller things to it that would be harder to kind of notice the difference in them. This particular model was advertised under various names, including the Kalamazoo Windproof Lighter, the Bauer's Windproof Lighter, and the Kalamazoo All-Weather Lighter. Another name that people would often call it was the Surefire, but that was not a specific name for this lighter. And it's hard to see on the picture, but on the little wind guard, they have Surefire engraved, so that's why a lot of people would call it that, because they saw the name on the lighter. But that is just what Bauer's used as a branding for multiple of their lighters. So it wasn't just this specific one that was called the Surefire. The Chesley Photography Studio Chair, so if you see there on the side, that is a chair that was used as a prop in George L. Chesley's photography studio here in Pipestone. So he was in Pipestone, a photographer here between 1885 and 1923, kind of off and on during that time frame. In the 1980s, many of his glass slides were discovered on the second floor of a downtown building in Pipestone, and they were donated to the museum. So over 3,000 negatives were found and donated to the collection, and they were digitized in 2015, so we have them all digitized and a list of the names attached to them. Now, we don't have complete records of the photos. They were not identified, unfortunately. The only identification is names that were written kind of on the margins of the photo, and that could be who was in the photo, but it also could have just been who paid the bill to Chesley. So we don't have all of them identified. Some we do, some we don't. And the ones we do have a list that you can search through and see what ones we have. We also have a number of his cabinet cards in the collection, other photographs that he took at his studio. So there is George Chesley, profile shot of him, and then there are a couple of the cabinet cards, which you can see his studio branding there on the bottom. And here are two photos that he took with that chair in the photo that was on the first slide that we have in the collection. So that's pretty cool that you can go back and actually see the photos, see the chair in photos he took. And so he took a lot of photos of local families and individuals here in Pipestone in the studio. Here's a couple other chairs he used. And you got everything from kid photos, individual portraits of people. There's a wedding photo there on the end. Then he'd do family portraits. That's one of the Pipestone Indian School baseball teams. So he kind of covered a wide range of topics in the people and groups he photographed. And then here are just a few more images of items that he used as props in his studio. So, we've got little baby carriage there. You've got the baby in a bag suitcase up there, some more chairs and little block they're sitting on. So he had quite the number of props he would use. And if you can see in that top corner one, he's also got some painted backgrounds that he would use in a lot of his different shots. The Geneva hand fluter is a specialized kind of sat iron, and it was used to press the fluted ruffles on linen cuffs, collars, and trims. And so it saved people a lot of time, and they were able to do it this way than having to individually press the ruffles. And so you would heat up the fluter, in coals, and then you would moisten the object that you were going to iron, put it onto the ridged base, and then you would rock the fluter over it to give the ruffles. And it was manufactured by a foundry in Geneva, Illinois that produced a number of household goods, and it was produced from around 1866 until around 1920. Then we've got this C.F. Marsh & Son and Oshkosh B'gosh advertising mirror. So Marsh's clothing store, C.F. Marsh, Charles Fremont Marsh, moved to Pipestone in 1888. He soon after that purchased Alex Stern's clothing store, and then he operated the COD clothing house here in Pipestone for a number of years and ended up moving the store to 109 West Main Street in 1911, where the store spent a majority of its time while it was open in Pipestone. And so they later changed the name to C.F. Marsh & Son Clothing. And so if you look at the pictures there, we've got Charles Fremont Marsh, and then we've got William Rolfe Marsh, who is the son in C.F. Marsh & Son. And so he graduated from high school, worked at the business with his dad for a little bit, and then ended up serving in World War I, and he ended up moving away to Minneapolis. So he wasn't involved in the business long, but he was involved for a period of time. So then later the store was taken over by David Spark. You got his image up there, who was the son-in-law of Marsh. And then David's son Charles ended up taking over the store too. So it stayed in the family for quite a number of decades. And in 1968, they sold the store to John Bolt and Chuck Sunderstum, and it became Mr. John's Clothing. So that was the end of the Marsh store here in Pipestone under the family. So the Oshkosh B'gosh side of the mirror there, close-up of the advertisement. So you can see C.F. Marsh & Son Inc., Pipestone on the bottom, and then Oshkosh B'gosh up top. So it was founded in 1895 as the Grove Manufacturing Company in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And they originally produced overalls for farmers and railroad workers. That was the main thing that they put out of their business. And so you can see on the mirror there, it says Mill Shrunk No Fade overalls. And the name Oshkosh B'gosh was first used in 1911 as the then manager of the company, William Pollock, heard it at a New York vaudeville show, Oshkosh B'gosh, so he liked it and he thought, well, we should start using that for the business. They didn't officially, though, adopt the name until 1937. So they would use it in branding and stuff, but they didn't change their name until much later on. As they continued producing overalls and other clothes over the decades, children's clothing became a bigger and bigger part of their business. And by the early 1990s, 95% of the clothing that they made, or I should say the sales of their clothing, were from children's clothes. So they were bought by clothing manufacturer Carter's in 2005, and they still are in existence producing clothes, but it is all now just children's clothes. So much of their sales were kids' clothes that they went all in on it. Then we've got leather postcard. So leather postcards became quite popular in the early 1900s. The images were burned or inked onto them, and they ended up being banned between 1907 and 1910 by the post office because it would jam up their machines. So they didn't like that and decided they needed to ban them to solve that problem. Some people continued to still trying to send them in envelopes, and eventually they became mailable again as they improved their mail processing machines. They didn't jam them up anymore. And this specific one was sent to Miss Floretta McAllister of St. Paul, Minnesota in 1906. So you can see, kind of got different designs on there. I've got another one out on the table you guys can look at afterwards that's got some playing cards on it and another saying. So that's kind of the style a lot of them went with is, kind of an image and then some words on it. And then the back there, you've got the stamp and the address to Miss Floretta there. Now we've got Captain Merle Dibble's World War II bomber jacket. So this is a Type A2 leather flight jacket or bomber jacket, and it was the standard issue and worn jacket by Air Corps airmen in World War II. So bombers would often get creative nicknames from their crew members, and the name and a picture painted on the nose of the plane, they would also do that. So some of the bombers included My Aching Back, Leadfoot, Pistol Packin' Mama, Pistol Packin' Papa, and Hitler's Headache. And Merle Dibble's plane was actually called Leading Lady, as you can see there on the jacket. So like I said, they would often paint images on the planes, and they would often do pinup girls or cartoon characters and paint both the name and the image on the nose of the plane. And they would often extend that creativity to the jacket and paint the image of the plane on the jacket, maybe the name. This one also includes the bombs there underneath it are the number of missions that he flew on. So they would often also do that to denote how many missions they'd been on. So Merle Dibble enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps in November of 1942, and he was 18 years old. He was part of the 486 Bomb Group, the 832nd Bomb Squadron, and he was a B-17 pilot. So on his plane, there was a crew of 10, including the pilot and co-pilot. And so we've got an image here of one of his crews, and he is the second from the right there on the top row. And here is an image of a B-17 and kind of just a breakdown of the different, where the different crew members sat. So you'd have a bombardier in the front and a navigator, and then you had the pilot and the co-pilot, and an engineer, and then you would have the radio operator, the ball turret gunner down there underneath, and then you would have a right waist gunner, a left waist gunner, and a tail gunner at the back. And so this is just kind of an image to show you all where the different members of the crew would sit on the plane. So he flew on a total of 30 missions in the Ardennes, the Rhineland, and Central Europe, and he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross in 1945 at the age of 20. And after he was discharged, he went to college, and then he returned to Pipestone and lived the rest of his days here in Pipestone. And so there is an image of him getting the Distinguished Flying Cross, and then another image of his jacket. So like I said, his plane was the Leading Lady. You've got the name there painted on, an image of the plane, and then, like I said, the bombs denote his 30 missions that he flew on during the war. Phonola multi-channel stereophonic high-fidelity record player. So this was made by the Waters Conley Company in Rochester, Minnesota. They originally started as a small camera company founded by brothers Carrie and Fred Connolly in 1899. So that was first, they just sold cameras. Glenn Waters later joined the brothers, and that's when it became the Waters Conley Company. And while they produced a variety of products, record players were a main product for years for the company, and this included the Phonola line of portable and console tube and transistor players. And so this one here has detachable speakers that you can box it all up together and move it on the go with you. We've got a pair of roller skates and a Hiawatha roller rink nickel. So we're going to talk about the Hiawatha roller rink here. These skates were actually used at the Hiawatha roller rink in the 1950s. And then you've got the wooden souvenir nickel, that they would have gave out at the roller rink. So the Hiawatha roller rink was built by Eldon and Lucille Miller in the 1950s. There you can see Eldon standing outside the building. And it was built at 1400 7th Street, Southeast Pipestone, the junction of Highway 75 and what was then 47, which is now Highway 30. So it was constructed of hollow tile with a real cool arch roof, which you can see the arched roof there in the image. And it opened in 1955. So the building features when they opened, this image here is out of the newspaper, so it's not the best, but you can kind of see the inside rink there. It was a 60-foot by 128-foot maple floor laid over concrete, and they had restrooms, skate checkout counter, and a refreshment counter where you could buy pop, candy, and ice cream. They also provided sales and repairs of skates and skating accessories and worked on 3 different brands of skates, including Heiser, Sure Grip, and Chicago skates. They also advertised that they played the best music they could get over their good sound system, and they would use tapes and records to play the music. So the grand opening was on September 17th, 1955. It included free Pepsi, coffee, and donuts, and they also gave out a bunch of different prizes, including for the oldest and youngest skaters on the floor. And so here is their grand opening ad that was placed in the County Star in September of 1955. You've got some different images of the rink there, advertising what they're going to do at the grand opening, and some well wishes from different businesses in town on their opening. Another item we have in the collection from the roller rink is this business card that advertises the skating hours and contact information for Eldon. So open skating was originally Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday nights from 7:30 to 10:30 p.m. And then they would have a Sunday matinee on Sunday afternoons from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And adult night was Tuesdays from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then party nights were Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that lays out how they kept their schedule, at least when they first opened. So it was eventually bought by Floyd and Adeline Pittman in 1971, and they had operated and built a rink in Ballatin previously, so then they moved to Pipestone and owned this one. And they operated it as the roller rink into the 1980s. And then eventually in 1990, the building was bought and Chuck Brennan opened the Blitz Ballroom, which closed roughly a year later. And so currently, the building is Gorder's Clay and Dairy Equipment, still stands. And in this one, you can get a little bit better look at the curved roof there. Yes?
My son played in a band
Okay,
in the 90s.
cool.
Yeah, cool.
And so that's all I've got for today, just a little bit of look at some of the items in the collection. It was about 10 items, so just a very small portion of our total collection, but a peek at what we've got. So if you got any questions, otherwise, thanks for coming out.
I can think of a lot of things, but did most of them end up living their whole life here, like back to the plaque and
Oh, the Broses? They...
recorded, I mean?
Yeah, we've got a lot of information on the Broses. Like I said, we've got an article on the website that kind of lays out all the kids and where they kind of moved off to in their lives. So they had another number of kids that grew up in Pipestone and then, moved away to other places. Like I said, Merle Dibble, after the war, came back here. Yep, and lived in Pipestone. So it's a good mix of some that stayed here a while and some that moved on.
Orchestra and things have been pretty popular for this small of a town. And there's a guy there that probably started a lot of that.
Yep.
And,
He was here from the early days, for sure.
yeah, and he played the harp, it looks like.
Yeah. He also offered music lessons at some point, so he played a number of different instruments.
So that building, the building that he had his music store in that had
That was
the angle,
Yeah.
was that later then was a music store later on, right, where you could buy musical instruments? I don't
I
remember the name
don't
of
know,
that.
I don't know, but I didn't really come to town until 60.
Oh.
In the 60s, so I wasn't born here, so.
Kenny's saying it was the Jersey music store
Yes.
later on. I'm like, I'm not familiar. But
Yeah.
So it stayed a music store.
after
It
the
was
Brose
on the
family,
corner
apparently.
then. Where the
It's right
parking
on the
lot
corner
was,
of-
Second Ave.
True Values
Parking
parking
lot.
lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a parking, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder when the building came down, because that was kind of a neat building. I mean, you had a picture.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Because we have saved so many of them, but yeah, that's a question.
Right.
It's a good question.
So many, but
Yeah.
some of the saving came as kind of a response to urban renewal in the
Right.
mid-60s to the early 70s. There was really
Yeah.
this
In the
tear down and rebuild mentality, and then some preservation groups formed
Yeah,
out of
grants
that.
from the state of Minnesota too,
Yeah.
I think helped with saving the ones, but yeah.
I'd be curious to know, and you probably don't have the answer. How old was the youngest and how old was the oldest skaters on the floor that they were
Oh,
surprised?
I don't know the youngest, but they did advertise in this ad
okay.
that they had opened before their grand opening. And so the week prior, they'd had an 81-year-old skater.
Wow,
Oh, yeah,
that's great.
I still have my skates, but I haven't skated. I can beat that.
I'm like, I'm not 81 and I don't pounce, so good for that 81-year-old that.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they kept it up,
And
I'm
when
sure
did
they
they
did
close
now.
the skating rink?
At some point in the 80s.
Okay. Because I remember 87 taking one of my children there with my grandparents, and he was 2.
Okay.
And he fell and tore his chin open
Oh,
on
no.
the side rail, and like 6 stitches later in the chin.
I wonder where was the roller skate rink in Ballatin? That the guy came from Ballatin. I'm familiar with
Yeah.
Ballatin too, kind of.
It was on the north side of Main Street.
North side of Main Street. Well, the lake is,
Well,
Before
it's
the-
where those little duplexes are now.
all those little ones.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
same street as,
It's Main Street.
no, it's the same street as the Methodist Church
Oh,
is
okay.
now.
Yeah, it's this
Yeah.
way, east and west then.
Mhm.
Yeah, the east and west road.
Yeah.
Okay. But that building is not there. No.
That building is not there.
No, okay. Good, I've been a little, enough. One question makes another.
Yeah, get some rolling.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so.
On the
Yeah.
south end of that building there, there's a big dent in the wall. That's from Ron.
The wall held you up and.
They used to have what they call whips,
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
yes, and then
yeah.
they let you go.
and they let me go, and I couldn't turn.
Oh, no.
You can break it, you know, it just made a hole in the wall.
And just embarrassment is what broke.
Yeah, okay, well, that's good, because it could have been worse.
Could have been worse, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I see best wishes, isn't that, does it say stout, or what's that last, over here?
Yeah, Stout and Son.
Yeah, so stouts, yeah, what they do, yeah. Yeah. Ben Schaefer Electric too in the middle there, right? Yeah. Do they have all the newspapers here? Not to change the.
Yes, we have the bound version of the newspapers and them on microfilm that we can pull up on the
I
computer.
knew Draper, very, yeah, I just passed, yeah, but anyway, she was really good about up there checking them all.
Yep.
And then she put them in.
That's for sure.
That was so special, yeah. She was a neat person, yeah.
What's the name of that is that a lumber company there by Stout?
Yeah, Botsford Lumber.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. Schaefer, I've heard, but not sure. Yeah. And what's the first one there then?
First one is George D. Backer, contractor.
Yeah, it was back there.
I think that lumber yard was located where City Hall's at now,
Okay.
on that corner.
I know they were an earlier one because there was the Laird Norton lumber yard in the early 1900s and Botsford took them over at some point, so.
And across the street was Winslow, he sold Mercury's. And that's where the high rise is at.
Okay.
Being these people are in roller skating, did you ever roller skate at Lake Campbell? That's, yeah, I was born and raised by Brookings.
I quit roller skating after I hit the
But
wall.
I mean, this isn't that far from that, by Brookings area, yeah. But that was pretty neat, that was right by the Lake Campbell. But it was always wet and it was low. And actually a classmate ended up buying that area and then he put a house and finally it was torn down. So it's not there anymore. Yeah. Whereas this building is still here, which is pretty neat too. Free Pepsi.
Yep.
Pepsi Cola must have been here already then.
It must have been, yes. Actually, Pepsi has a long history in
There's a
Pikestone.
there'd be a good program on that, yes.
Yes, it has a long history. Yeah, we could talk about that sometime. We should.
Good.
You should, I'd be very interested, I'm sure Mrs. Hollins would, yeah.
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 Well, thank you all for coming
Yes,
out.
thank
I know he's got some of the artifacts up here to look at, so
Yep.
feel free to come up and look.
Thanks for coming.